Alright, homies, what the hell is up? Lucy and Roller Skates. Hope you guys are doing well. Today's stream is going to be a little bit of something different. I'm going to rock for about hour and a half, maybe a little bit longer. We'll see how the day goes. So we got Jujic and Green Eggs and Spam already typing. I see you typing. You have been seen TPing. Caramelizing onions. Okay, good stuff. Yeah, so we've just sat down the last series to be played today inside Acropolis number 2's Gauntlet Stage A. We've just opened up signups for Gauntlet Stage B. In fact, I should definitely do that as a notice, right? Does that fit? Hell yeah, it does. We did see some interesting results. I'll say that much. I'll leak that much. It's pretty cool stuff, I gotta say. Shout out to our epic Refrades, Jujic being chief among them. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and tally up the stuff that's been done here, right? So out of the 14 opening matches, we did have one forfeit and one postpone, which means that we ran 12 matches today, by the way. And we had... Let's see, Jujic 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 matches adminned by Jujic. What looks to be 2 matches adminned by Innoslix, 2 matches adminned by the Shambler, and 3 matches adminned by myself. Shout out to myself. Oh shit, Green Eggs has his own question that he's going to throw into the chat. There you go, there you go. Is that actually the normal explanation, Eggs? It's been so long since I've read, like, the Brood War manual or whatever, so I don't know what their explanation was. Fucking Asian Longhorn Beetle cosplaying as a ladybug inside my room. I'm sure you'll think of some in the middle of the stream. You can't repair toss stuff in team games either in base Brood War. No, you can't. It has to be a Terran vehicle or structure. However, you can use medics to heal Zealots, High Templar, Dark Templar. I think that's it. I don't think you can heal Archons. It's not that it would matter much. So, the healing excuse... Actually, there wasn't one, diegetically. Because in team games, you could use medics with Zealots and stuff, right? By the way, while we wait for a little bit longer before we really get into the swing of things, I just wanted to point out, for some reason, when I see that there's multiple variants of the Zealot when I try to spawn a Zealot in the console, it actually fills me with this like intense desire to see more campaign content. And I think it's just because, isn't that like a cool thing? Like, we've got variants, we've got faction stuff, we've got all sorts of cool shit. So, I don't know, there's something about that is like, oh yeah, I'm pumped to do that, I want to do that. I don't know why. Just figured I'd throw that out there. I'll decide to stand up here. Nah, dude, you gotta hold on to your fucking corporeal form, your mortal coil. What's going on, Miriam? Welcome. I knew you'd like this stream. Alright, so... Juju, reading that made me think of... There's a unit, I can't remember which one. It's from the Undead race. Maybe it's a hero voice, actually. But I'm pretty sure it's from the Undead race, or side, in Warlords Battlecry 2/3. Because they're actually present, I think, in all of the games, but I'm only remembering this line from the second and third games. Anyway, there's just some guy going, "Flesh is weak." That game honestly did have some banger voice acting. It's like really over the top, like in your face, really going for it. And I can really respect that. I do actually unironically try to hit those same kind of notes in the voice acting for Cosmo. Like, I mean, part of that is obvious when you hear the Ahmed voice acting. So. Just a few, Miriam. Do we have a lore reason why Toss doesn't repair or heal? I remember suggesting a while back, maybe there's something more sinister about healing than meets the eye. Maybe some Ship of Theseus style conundrum that the Protoss find icky. Yeah, so, like, Terran healing methods are not necessarily... it's probably not something that you would ever really think of in the context of the normal, like, basically, I'll put it to you this way, right? Like, if I told you that you just need to have some field medic walk up to you and spray you with some kind of nanogun or whatever, considering this thing also repairs vehicles, right? Like, the cleric repairs vehicles with the same stuff that they repair biological targets with. If I told you that that was a thing, like, would you actually be okay with that? Like, if you're desperate in a battle situation, yeah, probably. But do you know what that is? Do you know what's going on? And so, yeah, sinister could be a word to describe Terran healing. I would just say, like, there's definitely some element of, like, Transformers, right? Like, more than meets the eye. Like, what's going on here? I gotta zero in on that a bit more. Yeah, so, like, after a certain point, there's definitely a point where, like, I mean, it's just, well, this is really funny and has absolutely, like, this is such a mental pseudo-terminally online connection to bridge in my brain, but we were at one point in Vile Void Speakers, which is inside the secret Cool Kids Club section of the Discord server. We were discussing whether or not vaccines were safe and effective, and I said essentially something to the effect of, you can't expect to introduce a basically global, like, almost virtually everybody, involves themselves or interacts with this, pharmaceutical or this therapy or whatever you want to call it. You can't introduce something to almost every human and expect there to not be some side effects that, yeah, you probably don't want. Now, on balance, is it good versus bad? I think that's down to the individual and probably should be a point of education, right? But to avoid the obvious, like, intellectual and political trap of discussing that, I'll apply that same logic here. You're telling me that you're just going to introduce mass healing in a way that just is like a mass, like, change to every biological entity that undergoes it, and there's not going to be side effects? I don't know about that. So I would say, like, that's where my brain goes, because we just had, it was like within the last month we had that conversation, and that's a point that I brought up. And yeah, it's definitely one of those things where it's like, yeah, I mean, if you want to just completely change how the body can heal, like, entirely, that's where my brain went. So, yeah. I think so, Skates. Shamans just walk around and... Dude, there was actually some mentally ill dude. Well, I say mentally ill. I assume he was. He didn't seem very well. Who was in the server a while, like, during peak COVID lockdowns. And he was like, I'd really love to play a game where I drive around in a vaccination truck and mass vaccinate by force at gunpoint a bunch of people. And I was like... You need a nap, dude. Take a nap. And so anyway, that's where I just, when Green Egg said shamans are mass cancer spreaders, I just imagined somebody piloting the shaman and just forcibly spreading the nanite field. Yeah. So the Terran infantry, because of the fact that they do end up utilizing a lot of cloning, let's just say their shelf life, their lifespan, is not guaranteed anyway. So, I mean, that opens up its own can of worms. Ethical considerations. Do you feel like you're comfortable using, you know, mass convicts, that, like, clones of convicts, you know? Is that really something that you want to be doing? What's going on here? And then, like, once they're done, I mean, maybe they live for 20 years if they don't die on the battlefield. Like, their life expectancy is pretty low on the battlefield, obviously. As just playing the game and going bio will tell you that. But there's going to be some that survive and maybe go back into some kind of whatever the Terran equivalent of, like, the Hive worlds are. You know, and so, yeah, there's definitely going to be a point where you've got all of these fucking hooligans that probably go back to crime, you know? Yeah, I need to go on a fasting binge and then pee blue so I can get all that cancer out. So to answer Green Eggs' question a little bit more directly, I would say Protoss have an ideological standpoint about, like, their code of honor. Like, this is actually something I think would be interesting to try to ameliorate or play around with the factions. But the Kalendric Knights and the Starbound are very desperate for whatever, right? So they don't really, their beggars can't be choosers. And the Order of the Sacred Templar believes that it's more important to save the lives of Protoss and preserve the lives of Protoss than it is to, you know, sacrifice them for good intentions, good ends, right? And then the Kalendric Knights are like, victory at all costs, we'll use forbidden weaponry, we don't care. And then the Divine Primacy is more like, here's a bunch of, you know, like some kind of middle ground between those two positions with the acceptance that you're going to end up losing a lot of Protoss. So I think Order of the Sacred Templar, and maybe to some lesser extent the Starbound, would probably end up using factional variants of the support units that maybe actually could provide some kind of in-combat healing. I wouldn't want to overstep too far, because in-combat healing is actually going to be a key detail of the Ascozi when we get to them. So not 100% sure that I'd go exactly that route, but it might be one of those things, you know, like, we'd have to see. I think that could be an interesting thing to try to play around with anyway. So, like, Terrans heal agnostic of combat. Like, if you have damaged units, you can move them near clerics or shamans and then they'll get healed, even if there's combat going on. Whereas, you know, maybe the Protoss healing could be expressly out of combat, similar to flash shielding. Maybe it could be something as simple as, like, here's a unit that has an aura that when the you know, allies with full shielding will start regenerating HP at a reduced rate or the same rate. I don't know. And that could be like some powerful aura support unit, like Clarion replacement or whatever. And, you know, you could see something like that happen for the Order of the Sacred Templar. And so I think that would be the thing that I would go for, is that it's downstream of the idea that it is honorable to fight, to be to sustain injury in combat, that is honorable. To die in combat, that is honorable. And in the Kalendric Knights case, actually necessary. So, yeah, I would say both of those are cases where I think it makes sense for the factions to invest more in like celebrating and cherishing the combat wounds, which is where like on a subtler note, right? We don't have I actually don't know that even if we had the budget to make a bunch of model variants for a bunch of things, we would want to do this. But imagine a world where you have like zealots, and then there's some zealots that have models that indicate that maybe like some of their limbs have been replaced or something, or augmented more fully. Their armor is a little bit different, to indicate that like, hey, this guy lost an arm, but he's still like fighting. That kind of thing would actually be pretty common in my world, in the Krysilliant world for Protoss, because the whole idea is that they invest more in like getting you back on your feet after an injury, as opposed to treating it right then and there in the battle. Like, it's a time for battle, right? And so I would say they probably do have like regenerative / healing capabilities that maybe on a technological level, you could pretty easily say, hey, this is stuff that actually works, unlike the Terran stuff. Like, this works and doesn't jeopardize our future health span and lifespan. But it requires time, so it can't be used in the middle of battle. And maybe that could even be something that like gets further emphasized by the out of combat nature of the Order of the Sacred Templar healing. But I would also say that the culture, the warrior culture of the Protoss, is very much like, no, your injuries are actually a badge of honor. They're an aspect of you that we build your service around, actually. Like, you've been so grievously wounded and mauled in a battle that you, like, your shields failed, your armor failed, your body failed. Well, we can put you into a strider and resuscitate you and get you back on the field and like celebrate you for that service, that dual service, that, you know, the fact that you are a twice-bound Protoss now. And by the way, I was playing around with the idea of thrice-bound. Like, I was thinking, what if we had something like, because if you think about it, right, when the Hierophant dies, it in addition to the Hierophant shell itself bursting, there is that same death, like fiery smoke effect. Like, okay, what could that mean, right? And so, like, there's things that we might be able to do there as well. And so, yeah, I think that would probably be where I would lean. It's like a two-part answer for that question, Green Eggs, is that the technology required to heal without jeopardizing the future lifespan of the Protoss does not bode well when it doesn't really work well in the middle of battle. It requires a longer time horizon to see results, which is the most satisfying answer to the question from a logical standpoint. But then I think the thematic standpoint is what that enables. It's like, okay, well, we don't have the ability to heal. We refuse to heal our warriors in a way that would reduce their lifespan in the future. We will cherish their wounds instead. And that's the thematic answer to it. So I think both of those are valuable, even though technically you could just leave it at the technological answer and it would be functional. I feel like also, like, what does that mean about their culture? That sort of idea there for the Protoss, I think works really well, personally anyway. What's going on, Monsieur Ryan? Yeah, Furin is not, he's already fallen in battle once. That's why he's referred to as twice bound in the tutorial. Yeah. You can send me stuff. I don't have sounds on for any of that, so you're not going to bug me. And I also don't have my audio enabled in Windows. Anyway. I actually went through and verified some replays before I went live for the stuff that I looked at, and it doesn't actually look like those replays worked, but I did observe them, so that's fine. And obviously I'm just going to ask the homies for their versions of the replays as well. So that is... I have it on the other monitor. I guess that decided to shit the bed on me for some reason. Which one was that anyway? That was 011, I think? Yeah. Very nice. Thank you, Jujik. Thanks for everything you did today, dude. That was really helpful today. I would, quite literally, I don't think I could have done it without you. I actually released a walkcast that kind of shed some light on that for the donators. One of the things that I do now as an added perk is that pretty much every day, at least most days, maybe we'll say 5 times a week on average, I'm releasing casts, like little mini podcasts of me walking around, or even sometimes just like relaxing at my house or whatever, just like speaking into my phone for a bit. I throw those up there. They're between 15 and 30 minutes usually. And those just kind of go through the those kind of just go through like what did I do today and what am I excited about like in the immediate future and stuff. So very much like fire off the hip, like here's what's going on right in the moment. And one of the things that I covered today is the fact that I did not actually sleep until I took like a 20-minute wink at some point in around like 10 o'clock my time, Eastern time. And then that was in the morning. And then I managed to take an hour-ish nap, a little over an hour nap, before having to do some more reffing. So it was a real fucking mess. And so anyway, I'm definitely feeling that. I definitely could not have done it without the help of the frauds today. So shout out to Jujik especially for running 5 different series across the day. And he was also free to play his own series. That one ended up getting rescheduled, but I guess technically that would have been he's involved in 6 of them, right? That would have been the case. And then we had Shambler step in, adminning 2 series. Obviously, Anozlix admin 2 series, I admin 3 series. So it was a real joint effort today, and I appreciate that. Something that Veek was telling me about fairly recently is that it would be nice in the future to actually have somewhat regional leagues, at least for events that have to be done, have games played in the middle of the weekday, which is the case for the Gauntlet, right? There's just too many matches to wait over the weekends for. And really solid stuff. I like the idea of having a European league, or like a European qualifier. And then the only weird thing is that like anybody in oceanic time zones would probably have to figure out, can I work better with the... Because we actually do. We have Neblime, Ava. K-Dusk is in a really eastern part of Russia, which is closer to oceanic time zone than not. And then Jakulansky, of course, in the Philippines. So we do actually have a group of players who I guess you'd say they should probably play in the Euro qualifier. And I would say the plurality of our players are in the America, like North America and South America, right? So there is that to consider. But like rest of world would be it's Americas and rest of world. That's it. Those are the qualifiers that we have. That might be something that I think about for Acropolis 3 or whatever. Yeah, most of the matches were not back-to-back. There was a case where the 2 series Inaz played, or admin, he also played a series today, so he was involved in 3 series. The 2 series he refed were actually back-to-back. I think he did 3 Crow Balathal. I don't actually remember off the dome what he did, but... What did he do? Yeah, he did 3 Crow Balathal, and then I think just before that, he had done Smarty Cakes Cannoli. Looking forward to getting those replays sent over to me. All right, so we are now going to set our sights on some Xibalba questions. Did I miss any like shorter term ones? Twin Spirits Burn Brighter was a funny one. I know Roller Skates asked me when did Cosmo have cloning? It's just a case of like the cloning aspect, right, is like that's how they're able to manufacture men, including pilots for vehicles sometimes. It's not actually true that every military man that you field is a clone, but most of the non-clones are reserved for endgame shit, or like drone pilots. Those are usually not clones. But when did I decide that it had cloning? I think I had to decide that it had cloning, because if you think about it, you can just like drop a stockade in the middle of nowhere with a mason, and then you can make men. So It kind of has to be cloning or fabrication of 3D printing a man. You got to be doing something, right? Man maker. "3D printing men is what Storm does it, really?" That's funny. Yeah, I mean, like, Mirian describing them as flash clones is particularly helpful because it kind of implies that their lifespan is very truncated relative to a normal-lived human. Like, the commanding officers are all not clones, right? Well, that might not always be true, but by and large, like, you would say, like, 95% to 99% of commanding officers would be not clones. Because they actually, you know, like... they're going to gain experience. They're actually worth more the longer they serve, you know? Oh, they don't have lore. Destroyed. Slur, what do you think clones and not clones have for each other? That's a good question. I try not to engage in slur discussion just because I can imagine the stink pieces, and it's a bit of a goofball thing to do to yourself. But yeah, derogatory term, whatever you want to call that. I think there probably would be. Like, I remember thinking how like Terran military would probably refer to the divine primacy as primates, right? Because like primacy, primates. That just felt like something that Terrans might call something. And it's not like it's not even really a derogatory term. It's just it's kind of like a catchy nickname that you would use. And yeah, you might be talking about hostiles, but you could also be talking about allies. Like if you're allied to the divine primacy in a given moment, you know, maybe the Golden Republic wouldn't say primates. Maybe their men might, but their like officers would be like, show some respect to these elevated creatures, and they'd be like, yeah, primates though. But for the most part, yeah. All right, dude. Thanks for hanging out and asking your questions, brother. We already have 3 signups for Gauntlet B. They're all people who have already signed up for Gauntlet A. So there's that. I don't think I'll ever get used to the slanted ceiling in here. Very dumb. Yeah, what would clones and not clones call each other? Obviously, the answer is clownies. No. Yeah. I hope that somebody can go through my currently public catalog of content and tell me what I need to hide. Probably the Flame Knives playthrough. There is a point where I drop some agate words, and it's not maggot. I actually don't really think that has as much sway anymore. I mean, it's probably better safe than sorry, but I don't think people give a shit as much. I think that kind of washed over society and is now no longer really a big problem. Yeah. Well, if they actually are... See, that's the weird thing, is that it didn't even... It never actually we didn't refer to people that way if they were actually homosexual. I just think back to the Louis C.K. bit, right? Where he goes like... Well, I can't really repeat it, can I? But anyway, it's pretty good. It's a pretty good bit about it. Alright, let me take a look through this. Can you clone Reclaimers? I think... You're talking about something that already shortens your shelf life very dramatically. If you're trying to clone that, I don't know if you can manage that. What you can do is you can have a clone and then have that clone be reclaimed. That can happen. But if you try to clone a Reclaimer, I think it would just come out like goop. Like it would be that green blood or whatever. Yeah. Twin Spirits Burn Brighter is, of course, a reference to the fact that the Centaur has twin engines at the end of it. If you didn't catch that. That might have just been a question in jest, though. Yeah, that's already been unlisted, though, so that doesn't count. Honestly, I feel like that game was way more racist than I was, though. Also, the same can definitely be said about the that Warcraft 3 knockoff game. What's it called? It's not Battle for Middle-earth, but it starts with a B, I think. That game was just fucking crazy, dude. You just, like, straight up, like... You would just, like, walk in with a man and you'd get a woman. You turn a man into a woman in that game. That's really fucking... I can't believe I can't remember the name of it. But, that game was ahead of its time. And also very offensive. Battle Realms. What a generic fucking name. No wonder I couldn't remember it. Yeah, Battle Realms. What a wild game. Okay, let me go through here and see. Purple. Dude, Purple Warrior might be the funniest. You know, I'm a guy who actually really likes to color purple, but that might be the funniest fucking... They did have a, They did have a resource in that game called Grapestone, I think. And that's also like, dude, only Koreans would come up with this shit. They are some wild motherfuckers. Like, the stuff I saw in those Starcraft clones, it just beggared belief. You really could not believe that shit was really there. Alright, I think I've gotten through all of the questions related to Starcraft Cosmonarchy stuff. Krysilliant stuff. So now we can take a look at the main attraction here. And I can bounce back and forth, so if you guys end up having questions, that's fine. Scozy deep lore. Yeah, actually they do come from Xibalba. Okay, so alright, so I don't think I leak anything. Oh wait, hold on. Okay, I don't think I leak anything by showing this, so this should be fine. I guess I'll close the private stuff. Besides that, no worries. There you go. Now I'm really good. Could have done that before, but whatever. Okay, so we have to... That's a good question, Losuke. So I'll answer that one after a couple of Xibalba ones. Keep that in mind. Okay, so we have the Krysilliant. Yeah, I guess Krysilliant. He's that's Mirian. He asks his first question back in September. Dude, this is a month old. Can't believe I'm taking this long to get to it. I will try to also write out a response, like at the same time as I'm doing it, right? So that I can like reply to it. So that there's an archive of it that you don't have to go back and watch the fucking stream to know what the answer was. Miriam's round here is, how do the Macrolon regard lame or mentally/physically retarded Daseer? Do they serve any role in their society? Do they make them kill each other for amusement, strap bombs to them, or do them to run into their foes? You repurpose Daseer remains as a sausage to be fed to their comrades, potential source of fertilizer? So this is so basically like it's a couple of ideas for how you might actually end up using it. And remember, the Macrolon, like these sound like horrific ideas to some that are uninitiated, but the Macrolon are sociopathic. They are not meant to be read in a positive light. They literally enslaved an entire group of people. Like now, like they did so, and like to an extent, you can argue that that alien species that has been, well, it's not really alien because they grew up on the same planet, but that other species has been elevated mentally, in terms of their capacity for different things and greatness in the universe or whatever, but it's still kind of a raw deal. I think that's uncontroversial. So yeah, the Macrodos are meant to be pretty horrific. So would they do all of these things? I would say it's not immediately grounds for dismissal, just because they're horrific ideas. The Macrolon are pretty brutal. They basically have this entire culture based around the idea that everybody is out for themselves. So when you have a situation like, I like to make comparisons to existing RTS lore, and I think about the Macroldas, or the Macrolon specifically, the dominant pairing, or the dominant part of that pairing. The Macrolon are basically that moment in StarCraft 2 Legacy of the Void when I think it was Zagara is the name of the queen, because I was about to say Niadra, but that's a hero unit that when you click on her, she says, "I am Niadra," and it's like fucking unit response 101 to maybe not have that be a fucking unit response in your game, because maybe you should have a character. If you're gonna have a character, maybe give them a name, and then, you know, if they have a name, maybe don't make them something that just exists for one mission. Or anyway, that whole thing was a disaster. But so the Macrolon are like, when Zagara is saying that she didn't kill Kerrigan because she has more to learn from her. Imagine that, but not Zerg, so it's not fucking cringe, because why are Zerg talking? This is cringe. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm after, right? It's like, that's a good way to distill down like a not cringe version of that, where it's like it actually makes sense within the physiology and the culture of the race. The Macrolon are all like that. Like, at some point they are going to try to betray you. They are going to try to backstab you. There will be political intrigue machinations. There will be ways for them to attempt to kill you or backstab you or exile you or whatever. And it's just a cost of doing business as a Macrolon. That's just expected. So again, like, they are not like humans in terms of their psychological makeup, right? This is just what they are expected to do. So with that being said, that's how they treat each other, whom they remember, like, they consider the Macrolon as a species to be like the heir apparent to all of the universe and the cosmos, and they consider themselves to be a superior race. Not in the garbage like political landscape that we have now. That's not really what I'm talking about. It's more like they just genuinely think that, like, well, yeah, we're just better. Like, we have we're more intelligent. We have the ability to bend creatures and reality to our will with psychic powers that include the ability to, technologically speaking, genetically manipulate our opponents to be more, bring them to heal easier. That's what we've done with the Dacier over generations, is we've taken them and we've made them more genetically predisposed to being controlled. So that kind of stuff is basically what they're all about. And so they have this idea that, like, well, they're just the superior race. Now, in practice, they actually aren't really. Like, they have actually middling technological power, maybe even on the lower end of that, but they're very scrappy and they're very cunning. And that's basically where they get a lot of their oomph from. And of course, they have like a lot of mass labor and chaff that they can throw at a problem. So going back to Mirian's question, when he asks basically what do they do for or with the Dacier that cannot be used for certain tasks, I would say, actually, I don't actually know how many times you would run into mentally deficient Dacier unless there was a brain-related injury, at which case they'd probably just decommission the individual. Like, they have no use for it at that point in terms of the front line. And it's probably not going to be that actually useful. Like, maybe you'd get one that would keep like a demented pet or something, because it's like, you know, oh, he could no longer receive commands, so he reverted to some kind of feral state, but also like a demented one because of his injury. And so, yeah, I keep him in like a cage in my fucking private yacht equivalent, you know, like something like that, right? My private office. Yeah, maybe there would be like small isolated cases of that. But actually, because the Macrolon have such power psychically over the ability of, like, you know, they have this genetic power, they have this ability to go through and, you know, do gene manipulation and psychic domination of an individual. They don't really, like, they have the ability to basically make an entity smarter over enough time, over enough generations, especially. Sort of like guided evolution, but a little bit fast-tracked. So when I'm going through all of this backstory for like what the Macrolon are capable of, I'm basically trying to pinpoint that, yeah, if you're physically incapable, you're probably not going to be on the front line as a warrior. You're probably not going to be on the front line as a builder. Those are physical activities. There's not really a place for you in tactics or in subterfuge or in any of the more cunning disciplines of war. Those are reserved for the Macrolon, because the Dossier, as elevated as they were, are still not very intelligent. They might have the intelligence of, like... They don't really have the intelligence of humans, but they would have, like, the spatial awareness and the ability, the skills of, in like, you know, manipulating dexterity and stuff of humans, right? Because, again, they have the ability to, like, build stuff. They are the construction backbone, the infrastructure, the engineers, in a way. Although not really in the sense of planning and designing, just in the sense of actually assembling, right? They are the assemblers of the Macral Das empires and of the war machines. There aren't actually... I was thinking back and forth, do I want a Macrolon builder? I don't actually think I do. I mean, you could envision one that, like, uses this, you know, their ability to control metal, or whatever, like their ferrokinesis, right? Their ability to do that. Yeah, you could maybe have something like that happen, but I think that's probably best for, like, combat scrappiness and not necessarily for actually building stuff. I remember that there's team building for the Macrodas, so the Dossier can, like, work together on the same design, right? And that's another reason why you don't really have a use for a demented one, or a defective one, you could say, because it's like, well, that's not going to be very helpful in the front line, right? So if we go back to the idea of, like, where do they go after they've sustained an injury and that it renders them not docile anymore? Yeah, they might be an exotic freak show type thing for Macrolon who are on military leave or are more in the civilian sectors. Although the civilian sectors of Macrolon, like, they don't have like a free market type deal or anything like that. You know, they're much more geared towards total war. Like, one thing that happens in Xibalba is there's not really that many, like, some of the regencies do actually have, like, peacetime populations that, in the context of, like, they're not really ever going to serve in the front line, right? But pretty much every Macrolon can serve on the front line in some capacity, either as an advisor, as a spy, as a specialist, as a actual frontline trooper. Like, every Macrolon, it's not really like a draft per se, because it's just, like, expected that you would do this. And then you retire out into politics, which is actually just a short hand for... You're still, all of your politics are still very much enshrined and entwined in war. And so you still have to work towards that, right? So I would say, like, there's going to be some things that are there for Macrolon amusement and Macrolon relaxation and Macrolon, you know, like, de-stressing or whatever. But there's not really the same thing. Like, if they have a zoo, it's for, like, the amusement of Macrolons while they are not actively in service doing one thing or another, be it a political appointment or a military appointment. And they're kind of the same thing anyway, as I was just mentioning. So that's that. As a result, there's not really, like, enough room per se for the societal roles, except for, again, like, yeah, you might have some freak show ones, some carnival ride shit. So yeah, there might be something like that. As far as, so we've answered the societal question, and you know, kill each other for amusement. That would be, like, the societal stuff, right? Like, I don't know that they would do that per se, because if they could fight, well, I guess I could see a world where they would be sadistic enough to be like, well, you can't really fight because you're defective, right? You've got some kind of lame aspect to you. And we're still going to make you do that or whatever. But usually if they've been injured like that, they actually can't receive orders. Again, so, you know, they might throw them into the ring and, you know, have them fight over a scrap of food or something. Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be cases like that. Do they strap bombs into them and order them to run into their foes? Again, well, it goes back to, like, can they receive orders? If so, and they are able to move, then they're probably going to be somewhat useful. I'm not sure if the Dossier will have a suicide unit. I typically avoid suicide units as a design. And so even though this is a question of, like, could this happen? Yeah, it could happen. Like I said, there's not really anything that was listed here that would be like, you could dismiss based on ethics, because the Macrolon are not an ethical people. But yeah, I would say, I think the Dossier themselves would be the ones to know, you know, they're almost expected to, like, get rid of the dregs of their society as it pertains to physical fitness. So they kind of self-select that way. That's based on, again, like the genetics and like the sort of like guided evolution towards what is useful for the Macrolon. So they don't really need oversight from the Macrolon side to say have cannibalism occur when that is necessary or effective, and use as fertilizer, right? It's like that's the second set of questions. But going back to, I think, maybe the more interesting things to talk about, yeah, I'm sure there could be cases where you would actually want to use Dossier as like expendable suicidal chaff. The question is that actually interesting and fun from a gameplay perspective? That's what I'd have to answer first. But in practice, in principle, sure. So if we're going to go ahead and answer this question, we'll say defective, in air quotes, Dossier are usually incapable of receiving commands, and as such would seldom be useful for any war efforts. That being said, there are use cases where Macrolon that are not actively on the war front or serving in a political appointment may want to have amusement during their off time, and I could see a case to be made where they might have defective gladiator battles or simply have a few defective Dossier locked up in cages as grim is probably the wrong word, but yeah, we'll just say grim trophies. And that is how we will reply to that question. I think I'll try to move a little bit faster because that was a pretty long amount of time just to talk about that stuff. But hopefully you guys appreciated how in-depth I went about the macro boss. Going back to what Roller Skates was asking in chat. What do I think of green? That's a good one from Miriam earlier. What would it take for the primacy to end up in conflict with each Protoss faction? So that's a Krysilliant question. The Divine Primacy has had to attack the Calendric Knights in some cases, or usually defend from the Calendric Knights. They don't usually go on a... They don't normally fire the first shot. They actively do pursue Starbound members, so that one's a pretty easy one. Like, there was even a mission that I can't remember if it's still released as like a one-shot or whatever, but where there's a Divine Primacy faction, a Divine Primacy pillar, the Alasara pillar, I believe, where you are using, you're chasing after Teriminok, a disgraced commander of the Protoss force, and it turns out, by the way, that there's some lore connecting that to the tutorial. You may remember that Teriminok is actually the name of the Protoss, the protagonist in the Protoss tutorial. So there is supposed to be like some connection there. That being said, I would say it's pretty easy to imagine the Divine Primacy pursuing Starbound convicts or whatever, vagabonds, vagrants, and bringing them to justice or attempting to do so, especially if they're consorting with Zerg or some of the more unsavory Terran factions. The Calendric Knights often butt heads with different isolated groups of Primacy forces. That's pretty common just because the Calendric Knights have a very different vision for how you're going to bring about the commencement, right? So that is that. But when it comes to the Order of the Sacred Saber, I'm not sure that they would actually fight each other with that one. I guess maybe if the Order of the Sacred Saber was like, in some way, a group of them was like taken over by a demiurge or one of those other way, like, you know, forbidden technologies, right? Although I'm pretty sure there's going to be a factional replacement for the demiurge for the Order of the Sacred Saber. I'm not sure about that one. But anyway, I could see a world where maybe they're deploying forbidden tech with the intention of trying to preserve the lives of Protoss, obviously, as the Order of the Sacred Saber is wont to do. And then the Divine Primacy were to see that and step in. I could see a very rare case where that could happen. But it's a lot harder to imagine that, because their goals are a lot more aligned than the other Protoss factions. It's more like the Order of the Sacred Saber broadly agrees with everything that the Divine Primacy holds, yet they feel they don't go far enough in the preservation of Protoss life and the sanctity and like the holiness, if you want to call it that, the divinity of the Protoss individual. That's more what the Sacred Saber is all about. So yeah, there you go. What's going on, Blind Rar? How you doing? Old creatures of Xibalba be called Xibalbasaurs. Honestly, it took me a moment to to be aware you were making a dinosaur pun, because all I thought of was Bulbasaur, and I was like, old creatures. I guess Pokemon are kind of old. I went a completely different direction than what you were trying to go for there, I think, but I actually haven't spent too much time designing critters. We should design critters at some point. Yeah, see, we got there in the end. All right, so where were we at here? This one's been answered. Democral. Oh no, there was a second part of that question, which is edited in afterwards, which is what are typical Macrolon exports in the event they consider trading with other regencies to be a worthwhile endeavor, or would such a thing never occur? So we'll say, I guess we'll have to copy this into a separate line and say, Macrolon exports are usually not taken in by other regencies due to the predilection of for spying, I guess we'll just say espionage, which I think includes sabotage. It's not just spying. That the Macrolon, I guess we'll just say Macrol DOS. The Macrolons often have, in the cases where it were to happen, it would mostly be raw materials for war machines. This is a necessary war machines to operate, and on occasion, mercenary squads of dossier led by self-enriching Macrolon commanders. All right, so hopefully that checks out there. Okay, let's go back up to where we were at. Got a lot of questions to get through today. So, 3Crow with a banger. Do Macrolon eat sushi or a sushi equivalent? I think we can pretty comfortably say that Macrolon are sick and twisted, if you want to use those terminologies. They don't really think of it as that. They're just like, yeah, this is a thing. And so, for intimidation purposes, Macrolon have actually been known to commit cannibalism, particularly if they suspect an impending plot on their life, and wish to dissuade their would-be successors. So, sometimes. So on occasion, this does happen. I guess that's what we can say there. The sushi equivalent is actually Macrolon. For all other seafood delights, they did evolve eating other sea life on their planet, and therefore on their home planet, and therefore do have a natural position to it. So there you go. Question answered by a 4-3 Crow. Our tournament started off with some interesting shit today, man. I'm really looking forward to those round 2 matchups. We got some TVT going on, and apparently we got some answers. We got some information. Dude, why are you being a nuisance? I still can't actually tell. I think it's a longhorn beetle, just because ladybugs are actually so rare. But this motherfucker really wants me to smash it or something. I've been just sparing its life for days, thinking it would just leave at some point, but he's just hanging. What's going on, Balethol? Yeah, congrats, dude. Alright. Pretty epic stuff that you were not the only upset today, I'll say that. You weren't. I don't know if you were the biggest upsets by seeding. I don't think so. I think I know who the biggest upset was. But you were. I think there was only 2 upsets today. Let me quickly take a look. One of them doesn't count because it was a forfeit, but in my mind that's not an upset really. Technically, one opening match hasn't gotten played yet. So there's still room for an upset. I kind of doubt that it'll happen, but, you know. Yeah. You were one of 2 upsets, so you were the second biggest upset. Well, based on seeding, right? It's like the gap in seeding between you and 3 Crow was smaller than the other matchup that was upset. So that's why I say you weren't the biggest one. Okay, so we scroll past this one. That one was just Shambler B and banter. Okay, so let's see. Are there any veteran Githrovan that preemptively engage certain regencies, e.g. Psychora, either on site or with minor provocation to prevent being forced to utilize profanations or other high-end technologies? Okay, so we would say some regencies, any artificial created regency will draw immediate ire of Githrovans, reducing the likelihood of peaceful conduct. This means means quote-unquote unprovoked attacks are likely, and we would expect Githrovans to even be more permissive of forbidden technology when facing threats which have escaped containment, so to speak. Artificial regencies include Rune, yeah, that's right. Let's see, Rune, Rosalium, Solar Throne. Okay. Go there. Scrolling. our dossier distributed to and between Macrolon? So we would say Macrolon typically acquire their own slaves through successful during military training exercise. I don't know why I can't spell today. Probably the fact that I haven't slept. I guess that's probably the main reason. Top performers in various I guess we'll just say military training, the top performers in exercises, courses, etc. Typically I guess we'll say to land a top performance, to achieve top marks, fielding a personal band of dossier is required. So the best and brightest, we'll say the most effective Macrolon commanders would graduate. It's not really a typical military academy or anything. What are you gonna do now, bitch? It doesn't seem to care. I turned the light off on it. Alright, with a small platoon already acquired. From that point onward, dossier would be deployed based on the judgment and orders of commanding officers. Maybe senior officers. Battlefields. Sectors. Oh, we have to move up further. What regencies have an equivalent to the internet? Take a look at the regency list. So there has to be some kind of communication network for most of the humanoid, non-technological regencies, right? I think if you're a technological regency, you don't really need... You could probably just directly uplink and send information between it. That's how the Rosellium would work. That's also how the Orlithrae tend to work. They have network nodes, right? But they don't need to like make internet posts or whatever. Whereas you might actually need some kind of interface and like content delivery system and stuff for things like the Ansifi, the Embraceet. I would think the Keltar would actually communicate predominantly with, like, I'm forgetting the term right now, but there's, it's like the hologram technology that you would see in, like, the original trilogy Star Wars movies. That's probably more to the Keltar taste. They wouldn't be blue, but, you know, that would be more what they would communicate with. They prefer that face-to-face feeling. They're a bit more, like, earthy, for lack of a better term. Their technology is a necessity for war. But they're very much like still, I guess, spiritually minded. Macrolon have the ability to communicate telepathically with some assistance from technology as well, so I don't think they would need it. Obviously, Psychora have a completely extra-dimensional method of communication. Githrovans also have that psychic capacity. So I'd say, so far, we've got Ansifi and Embraceet, who are slam dunk internet havers. Oros have... I guess Oros probably would have something like it, but... There'd be like data shards. I guess that might be something like the data crystals in Dune. The Oros might have something like that. It's not really an internet, right? Like they have like archivists and stuff. The Rune have like instinctual communication. They also don't really care about communicating as much, so they wouldn't have it. They're not an inventor species. And Gadamemptor is just one super consciousness. The Thrantir, not Arasatha. Would either of those have an internet? I'm sure the Bithrantir had it at some point. I just don't know if it would actually still be utilized at this point. What's going on, Spheroid? I haven't played Rain World, so I actually don't know what you mean. Pearls are like a mechanism for distributing information. I should get around to playing Rain World at some point. Let's see. There's Bithrantir, there's Nadarasatha. I think neither of the Bithrantir nor the Nadarasatha would end up using an internet equivalent. Tithron, Kolopozos. Yeah, Catithrons have that whole, like, sort of like Arrival, which I watched after coming up with the Catithrons, so... but I was, I think, tangentially aware that they had that same kind of mechanism anyway, where they experienced their life all at once. Kolopozos is... Well, the Kolopozos does have an internet. It's just not in this dimension. Dalventhos, Amindris. Obviously, the Dalventhos has, like, digital consciousness, so... I don't know if you'd count that. I guess, like, hyper-advanced internet. Amindris doesn't have it. Rakanavo don't have it. Okay, so we know that the answer is Ansifi, Embraceet, Kolopozos, and I guess maybe Dalventhos. That's what we can say there. We can say... what would we say? Kolopo. Yeah, so we say Ansifi, Embraceet, and Kolopozos possess vaguely recognizable internet networks. Their other one was Oros use a method of data storage not unlike the Dune memory crystals. I guess we'll say the memory crystals in the later Dune books. Highlighted their Dune books. I can't remember if they were in the earlier Dune books. It's been a while. But, and they do have the capacity transmit that information to remote terminals. Dalventhos have what could be construed as a hyper-advanced internet, given they have digitized consciousness. Okay. Information coded directly on into literal pearls, like I have anything from code to text to sound, the whole shebang. Yeah, that could be kind of interesting. I wonder if the Oros would actually have the capacity to do that. Because they're electrokinetic, right? So they have the ability to, like, control electricity. So they could probably do a lot of things. You think about circuitry or whatever. But it would so that's, like, a really easy way to make it so that, like, something is accessible only by an Oros. You know? Have any Githrovan utilized the threat of utter annihilation to prevent conflict from breaking out? Yeah, I would say, like, this is a very dangerous gambit for Githrovans to take, particularly since they are not quite known to bluff or lie. They would genuinely have to... they would also have to go through the expensive and dangerous process of preparing the planet slash spacer for for annihilation. Apocalypse is what we'll say. That's a reference to the apocalypse ending that we planned. Spacer for apocalypse, which, since otherwise the bluff would likely be called. At this point, things could go very wrong, but it has been used before. I will say this bluff has been used before. Sure. I think that's fine. How do the Macrolon regard the Dossier utilized as mercenaries? Do they not care? Do they view it as an insult that another would utilize their eternal servants, stealing the race's property? Right, so the Macrolon see the Dossier predominantly as useful servants and vital to their war machine and society. An update on the bug, it is now on my monitor. Dude, can't you, like, fly out the window or something? What's wrong with you? Biggest part is they're durable as hell and can also be rid from a foot or two away if you have access to telepathy. Massive fucking understatement and simplified down an indefinite moment. An indefinite amount. What's up, Rodrigo? Yeah, I got some okay WPM. Nothing on the Shambler, though. Shout out to my homie, the Shambler. Types like a motherfucker. His WPM exceeds his APM, if you know what I'm saying. Vital to their war machine and society. Sometimes it does benefit Macrolon empires to lend out, to provide some, what would you say, expendable amounts of Dossier as mercenaries, and the pragmatic leaders of said empires will often dispatch Macrolon commanders to must also dispatch Macrolon commanders to continue to make sure. I guess we'll say it doesn't have to be. We'll often dispatch Macrolon commanders to make sure the Dossier do precisely what the Macrolon want first, and what their employers want second. So, I think that's a fine answer. Writing like a pro gamer. Hell yeah, dude. I do have to write a lot sometimes, you know? Is it planned for there to be upstarts featuring the Bithrantic Curse when they are added as a regency? So I would say upstarts as a mechanic will be vetted through RTS games before getting to the point where we are ready to release the Bithrantier. That being said, having status effects mix in with neutral zones or entities seems like a pretty easy way to add some depth and intrigue into certain maps. Exclamation point. What is happening right now? I am answering questions about my Krysilliant sector, which is the Cosmonarchy Starcraft rewrite, and Xibalba, which is a different sci-fi setting. And technically, I'll field questions on pretty much anything, but those are as you can see, there's quite the backlog of questions that I'm getting through right now. And the curse is not... That was a pretty easy one. The part of them that... so we'd say Dalventhos can dismiss their physical forms and return to digital consciousness at any point or at will. The Psychoran victims are less... Oh yeah, I should be answering this over here so you guys can read it a little bit better. The Psychoran victims are less fortunate and get and are consigned to three-dimensional existence, a permanent three-dimensional existence. Can the Krysilliant break down Bith, cursed, or Azos-affected materials, or do they ignore/avoid them? I guess I would say Krysilliant are capable of using most Azos-affected materials. Mithrantic curse... can be dispelled if the cursed object or entity, well, not dispelled, but broken, in air quotes, I don't know. If the cursed object or entity is trapped within a stasis chamber, stasis chamber, which is typically reserved for Catethron. Get the term for the Cathethrons. I guess I would say armadas. But can be constructed by Krysilliant and Azos. Or not Azos. Maybe, was he saying Azos? It says Azos affected materials, but I think he might have meant Avodi. Because Azos affected materials is just like the fear thing. I mean, like, the materials don't have a curse associated with them. I'm going to assume he means Avodi. AKA Avot. Not generally go through this expensive process for the limited materials that the Mithrantic curse afflicts. Okay. How many of the sentient regencies have religions? Well, let's first quickly take a look at the sentient regencies. Ansifi and Brasite, Keltar, Githrovin, Makrolon, part of Makroldas, Psychora. I don't think you would count the Orlithray as sentient in the same way. Like a mass consciousness, right? Krysilliant or not. Solarthrone R, I guess. Let's see, Orosar. The Rune do not. The I'm not sure about Gadamemptor if it's sentient. I'm also I mean I like if it counts as that or whatever. So I would say like regencies with religions include the Ansifi Umbra seat. Okay. I saw that question, Skates. I will get to that momentarily here. What forms of mourning are practiced by the Githrovan after a profanation? How often do other regencies take advantage of such a state? So I guess we would say Githrovan mourning atonement occurs only when... I think there's only one R and occurs like that. I was thinking of occurring. Githrovan atonement occurs only when you... when the Githrovans are certain... I guess when the conflict is believed to be concluded. It can be compared to a society-wide sleep debt that must be paid off, and that the Githrovans never truly recover from. This wear on their psyche can only be... maybe we'll say would be hard-pressed to recover from. This wear on their psyche can typically requires genuine progress towards commencement in order to avoid... what would we say? To be quelled. And that is when the idealistic nature of the Githrovans can be taken advantage of by other regencies. So others would likely say that... So I guess we'll say... So other regencies would likely log or note when atonement was occurring and plan their moves for the rebound. Oh, maybe I missed that. I feel like you might have said something like that earlier, Ryan. Sorry for if I missed that. That Ascending Hope guy just fucking yeeted himself out of here, dude. See ya. Alright, I'm going to answer this last question because it's in the same block, and then I'll turn to the chat questions. Counterparts of the Nidus Trinity and Xibalba? Do they worship or revere the Orlith Ray? I have not explicitly laid out plans for Orlith Ray worshippers because they... I think there's only one P in worshipper. Is that right? Worship. Oh, alternative spelling, I guess. Alright. Because they operate very differently from Cthulhu and Krysilliant. These are... That being said, with the sheer breadth of this... sheer scale of the setting, it's quite likely that the... somewhere out there, Orlith Ray fanatics exist. Okay. All right, so we will get ready for that. I'm just gonna quickly take a look at this. I gotta check the time here as well. Okay, let's answer some chat questions here. I am probably going to have to call it in like 5-10 minutes. There's obviously more to answer. So I'll plow through a couple of these after the chat questions. If you guys want to hit me with any now, let me know. Okay, hold on. How would an Omniveil faction work in the world of Krysilliant? So, like, what is the Omniveil, right? That's the question that's on everybody's minds. And I've heard some theories. I've heard some ideas. I've heard that some people think it's a wayward Colopoid influence from Xibalba. I've heard some people think that it might be an entropic creation from Onatar. All I'm going to say is there's very much a case to be made for some kind of more homebrew reason for why the Omniveil exists, or what it is, and what created it. I would imagine you will actually get some lore-related tidbits of that when we end up getting one of our campaigns out, because there will be a point where in the campaign you will use the Omniveil. So how would an Omniveil faction work in the world of Krysilliant? I guess you mean less faction in the sense of like the actual in-game factions, and more like you're talking about more like like if it was a race, right? That's what I'm reading here. Krysilliant Omniveil based, like whatever generated the the Omniveil turned into an actual race. I would think that they would just have like some kind of amalgam. Remember that the Omniveil eventually, it would be good if the Omniveil could do stuff like also field Viscosi related things, right? So eventually we've got to work that in there for omnipresence, and also for like duopoly and shit like that, right? Because the Omniveil has omni in the name. It means all. So yeah, I would say, how would the faction work? I would imagine you'd probably take, like, say, the Stockade and the Gateway, and the Fulcrum and the Hydrith Den, and like the Star Pad. Like you basically take a couple of these structures and like merge them with others. Or maybe it would be like, maybe it would be a totally original thing, like a totally original structure, similar to how the Omniveil is. Rather than being able to make any unit, though, maybe you'd have to specialize or like decide what what races were going to be enabled. Like maybe there'd be like a max, like you can train 2, or well, I guess it would depend on, like, if it's a production structure, you could train like 5 units, right? So you can choose to get Larva, which will give you access to like pool units for the basic infantry production structure. And that would be like 2 of your units that you could choose from. Or you could maybe choose just to have 1, but it would still spawn Larva. Although that might be really powerful, because their units would then they'd bypass the queuing system entirely. So I think we'd probably want to skip the queuing part, or skip the Larva part, and make it so you train the units directly. I think that's probably what we would have to do. maybe we could create the egg externally when you do that, but there's no larva associated with it, right? That could be a thing. Yeah, I think that's what we would do. So we would have unique structures for each point in the tech tree, and you'd have to customize them in some way in order to decide, okay, they're going to spread Kagra. Maybe it would be based on which unit you make the structure with. That would be really convoluted, I think. But if a Mason made it, then it would be able to float and also put an add-on down. If Scribe made it, then it requires power, right, and has flash shielding. And if a Droleth made it, then it spreads Kagra and spawns larva. Could be something like that. I'm just spitballing here. I'd have to simplify that at some point. That's a lot of stuff to think about. But I think we're on the track there. That's basically how I would go about it from a mechanistic standpoint. Skates asks, what's the government/life like in the Futurist Federation and Hekaton compared to the Orion? So the Hekaton Coalition is obviously like currently experiencing a mass upheaval because they've had to evacuate their whole sector, basically. So that's pretty rough for them. You can imagine life is like on a flotilla ship or something where they have these giant population vessels that are probably going to be permanent vessels, permanent residences for a number of the people and a number of the populace. And then we've got, taking a step away from that, we also have the idea that the people that you'd be looking at for the people that you'd be looking at for not Otini. Hold on. Oh, really? There you go. I was trying to remember. Okay. Yeah, so I would say, like, when you're in the middle of trying to survive this mass exodus, you kind of need to just have this permanent residence on a ship. So I would say life is pretty hard, and they've displaced and probably traumatized. So that's kind of like on the consciousness of the entirety of the Hekaton Coalition. They're going into a place where they are not familiar with the area. They don't have established reputations and relationships with the other Terran fields, the other Terran people, nations and stuff. They also have had to make first contact with Ascozi. They've probably run into Protoss, seldom, but sometimes. And they've definitely run into a lot of Zerg, since the Zerg is what sent them packing from their home sector. But they never encountered Ascozi before, and the Ascozi are in the Krysilliant sector, right? So that's another thing that they've got to deal with. There's like another whole alien species that they're going to have to account for with their weaponry. So there's definitely a lot in flux with the Hekatons, and it's a very uncertain time where there's a lot of fear and a lot of it's not a pleasant experience. Compare that to the Futurist Federation. These guys are also probably on edge, maybe a bit of fear going on for them. But definitely they are also in a position where they feel like they have the answers. They just need the time to deploy them, to test them, to experiment with them, to and also have a little bit of subterfuge associated with that. And they have a couple of plans within plans and some contingencies, and they feel like they should be able, generally speaking, to get it. That's how the higher ups are, and those higher ups do communicate that somewhat transparently with the populace, but obviously enough to they're not really particular about the specifics. They just say, we have confidence that things are obviously a challenge given the relative strengths of the other active races and active nations, but we have a way to do this. We have faith in ourselves. We will succeed despite the challenges, and so that's been communicated to the populace. So it's like everybody's on edge, but they have some confidence in that they'll be okay at the end of the day in aggregate. The Orion civilian life is like super varied, because the Orion Imperium mostly focuses its attention on trade lines, military, and expansionism, stuff like that. Obviously, resource allocation, so mining and stuff. But they contract a lot of that stuff out. They contract to mercenaries, they contract to mining guilds, they contract to local, people, like what would otherwise be like upstart militaries or whatever on border worlds and shit like that. So Orion life is very varied. It depends on if you're in one of like the sort of kingdom areas of the inner circle, the inner sanctum of the Orion Imperium, where they have a lot of military presence and it's a lot of pomp and circumstance and very well equipped and like, bougie lifestyle. And then obviously all of the serfs and people who are serving that. But then there's obviously, you go further out, you push yourself into a realm where you're talking about like the extremities. Well, those people only maybe recently became under the protection, in air quotes. But it's true protection, but it comes at a cost of the Orion Imperium. And they are probably a lot less franchised, right? They're probably a lot more disenfranchised, perhaps. But, they're feeling like, well, this is what we have to do to live. That probably gave you a little bit more insight into the government as well of the Orion Imperium. The government of the Futurist Federation was a little bit shed its light on there, right? And then obviously the government for the Hikaton Coalition is just straight up like war doctrine, like emergency powers granted, etc., etc. So I think we'll probably close on that one. I did answer one more question in the meantime. So we'll kick things back off when we answer the question here. I will answer more of these questions. There's obviously a lot more to go through. But I think we probably did about half of them, actually. And also obviously had some chat engagement. GG boys, we'll be back tomorrow for more content. I don't know if I'll do another Q&A stream tomorrow, but I will do another one at some point soon. I definitely have to get some more work done on Cosmo, though, so we'll be doing some of that tomorrow, whether it's on stream or not. Thanks to everybody who sent in their donations. Thanks to everybody who played in Acropolis 2's Gauntlet today. Looking forward to round dose for the next set of matches. I'll see you guys very soon. Peace.